Migration is a fact of life, but in these recent years, it has become a dramatic international phenomenon. And Pope Francis and Caritas Internationalis.
The sun was setting behind the Roman horizon, creating a warm golden glow on the marble columns of St. Peter's Basilica. Shadows stretched out across the cobblestones as the Vatican bells tolled in deep.
And through our humane treatment of the migrants, we want to show the world that this is not just a political, economic.
Ancient tones. Pilgrims stood cheek to shoulder in the piazza, looking up at the little chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. Some carried candles, some rosaries, but all held something unseen: expectation. This was not an ordinary evening. The church was at a crossroads, a watershed moment, and more than 1 billion Catholics were united in a single posture, waiting. A papal election may appear to those outside the Catholic tradition to be a bizarre, ritualistic, and enigmatic rite, yet it is considerably more sacred to the faithful. It is not a matter of politics or popularity, but of spiritual discernment, which dates back 2,000 years to Peter himself. With the death or resignation of a pope, the Church enters a solemn time known as sede vacante, which means the seat is vacant. During this moment, St. Peter's chair is empty, both metaphorically and literally. No encyclicals are issued. No worldwide declarations are issued. It is a halt, a silence. And yet, in that quiet, the Church leans in more towards heaven, asking the same question that was voiced on the shores of Galilee: Lord, whom will you send? As the doors to the Sistine Chapel were sealed earlier that afternoon, the world's attention turned inside. The weight of the question was now borne by 120 cardinals. These men, picked from every continent, now sat in front of Michelangelo's frescoes, with Christ the Judge above them and the Last Supper surrounding them in spirit. They had taken an oath of secrecy: no phones, no journalists, and no intrusion. All they had was the Holy Spirit, their prayers, and each other. What occurs within those walls is one of the most holy and intimate discussions left in the modern world. Outside, the world was watching. St. Peter's Square was packed not only with pilgrims, but also with photographers, experts, and journalists. Flags of dozens of countries flapped in the early evening breeze. Voices mumbled in multiple languages. Do you believe they will choose someone from Africa? Is it time for an Asian pope? What if they travel back to Europe? These were not mere speculations. They were statements of longing from Catholics hoping to see their own lives reflected in the man who will wear the white robes next. But underlying the conversation came something more serious. Many people were aware that this conclave would take place during a global crisis. The Church has withstood many storms, including scandal, secularism, internal disagreement, and political turmoil. But the faithful continue to return. They always return, because they want faithfulness in a shepherd, rather than perfection in a man. Someone who, like Christ, understands how to carry the broken, speak kindly to the impoverished, and stand fast when the truth is under attack. That was the mood as the sun set behind the basilica, and darkness fell over the piazza, an expectant stillness. There was no white smoke yet. There are no bells, no names. Only the Church, ancient and vibrant, assembled in prayer, asking again, "Who will feed my sheep?" Nobody knew who would emerge from the conclave, but one name kept coming up in talks among the faithful, commentaries, and hopeful conjecture. A guy who had never sought power, but had always relied on the heart of the gospel. A man most known for his tears at the altar rather than his political voice, a son of Asia, a friend to the impoverished, a theologian with the spirit of a pastor. A cardinal called Luis Antonio Tagle. The Church and the world waited, not for certainty, but as a sign, not for a king, but rather a shepherd. And in the hush, a single question resounded beneath the frescoes, in the piazza, and in the hearts of millions. What kind of man must head the Church now, when faith is dwindling and the world aches? The marble floors of the Apostolic Palace at the Vatican echo softly as the final footfall recede. The huge doors of the Sistine Chapel close with a roar that echoes through the years. A sacred sound is beginning. Outside, the throng becomes hushed, almost instinctively feeling the change. The conclave has begun. This is not the modern election. There are no speeches, campaigns, TV debates, or social media advertisements. In many respects, the Papal Conclave defies our time. It is highly private in a world that demands transparency, and it is purposely slow in a fast-paced world. And still, it continues. This rite, shrouded in awe and mystery, continues to captivate the planet each time it is performed. And it is only invoked when something sacred is disrupted, such as the end of a papacy. The ritual of electing a new pope dates back to the early days of Christianity. St. Peter, widely recognized as the first pope, was never elected in a conclave, but was unquestionably selected by Christ. Following Peter's martyrdom in Rome, the young church had to decide how to replace such a towering spiritual figure. Local clergy elected successors, monarchs and emperors gained authority, and crises prompted changes. The Gregorian reforms of the 11th century granted the cardinals exclusive authority over papal election, establishing the College of Cardinals as the electoral body. Later, in the 13th century, following a years-long papal vacancy that irritated the people of Viterbo, cardinals were first kept in, cum clave, with a key. As a result, the conclave that we know today was born. It has been held during plague outbreaks, invasions, internal schisms and corruption, and global wars. Despite its intricacies and flaws, the conclave survives because the Church thinks something more than human endeavor is at work within it. The conclave is more than just a decision, it is a discernment. Before casting their ballots, the cardinals swear an oath of total secrecy. What they see, hear, and discuss inside the Sistine Chapel must never be revealed. The oath is more than merely procedural, it is spiritual. It safeguards the process from manipulation, but more importantly, it humbles the men within. It reminds them that this is not their moment, but God's. Each cardinal dressed in scarlet sits beneath Michelangelo's paintings, with the dreadful majesty of the Last Judgment above them and Genesis scenes all around them. It is no coincidence that the conclave takes place here. The images are a daily reminder. You are selecting a man to lead the Church through sin and suffering, life and death, with the understanding that he will answer to God, not history books. Each cardinal carries handwritten ballots to the altar. As they approach, they announce, "I call as my witness Christ the Lord, who will be my judge, that my vote is given to the one who, before God, I believe should be elected." The words are not symbolic. They are substantial and personal. Nobody takes them lightly. After the ballots are counted and read, they are burned, either alone or with chemicals, to produce the distinctive black or white smoke. Black smoke indicates a lack of consensus. White indicates a new pope. The world looks at that chimney as if it were the mouth of heaven itself, and the entire world is watching right now. From televisions in cathedrals to phones in cafes, all eyes are on the Vatican. Analysts evaluate the potential candidates. Faithful Catholics recite the rosary. Atheists admire the pageantry. Some people keep an eye out for historical events. Some look for hope, but everyone is watching. And yet, inside the chapel, where no cameras can see, the soul moves in silence. There is no whispering tactic among campaign managers. No one knows who will tip the scales until the moment comes. Sometimes it is the norm. Sometimes it comes as a surprise. However, it has always been mysterious. This conclave, like many before it, has its own distinct tension. The Church today is at a crossroads. Some people seek a stabilizing influence, someone to provide continuity. Others pray for renewal, for a pope who will hear the cries of the poor, young, and forgotten. Some people advocate for a return to previous forms. Others desire a pastoral heart that speaks the language of this generation. Names are murmured, Europeans with extensive curatorial expertise. Africans have thriving churches. Latin Americans with keen theological minds. Then there is one name that gets spoken more and more, but never loudly, just consistently. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. He is not the favorite in all predictions. However, he is present in many hearts. A man of depth and tenderness. A guy whose tears in the pulpit are not marks of weakness, but of a heart full of life. A guy who has marched alongside refugees, stood amid slums, preached to the mighty, and served quietly. The votes are still being cast. The smoke is still dark. However, for many who are paying close attention, one truth is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Many names are muttered, yet one emerges differently. As the conclave continues behind closed doors and black smoke rises from the Sistine Chapel's chimney, one name continues to ring forth, not with the thunder of certainty, but with the delicate, steady beat of hopefulness. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. His name appears repeatedly among the bishops, who are quietly giving off-the-record interviews, as well as among the devout gathered in the plaza. Not yelled, not forced, just there, present, persistent. Not declared, but discerned. He is not the clear frontrunner. He is not leading any specific faction. He has not organized alliances. And perhaps this is why people are paying attention. In a church weary of politics, the appearance of ambition and superficiality, Cardinal Tagle's quiet presence has begun to feel hallowed, a possibility worth considering. Catholic journalists around the world have noticed an increase in mentions of his name. Major venues in Rome and Manila have published thoughtful essays on his theology, leadership, and impact on the world church. He is already a well-known personality in Vatican circles, having served as prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. But what distinguishes him is not just his title, but the man behind the crimson cassock, soft-spoken, teary-eyed, intellectually sound, and profoundly pastoral. A cardinal who listens more than he says, feels more than he theorizes, and thinks more than he acts. The idea of Tagle advancing to the Pope excites the faithful, particularly those in Asia and the global South, not because to nationalism or identity politics, but because of what it would represent. What if Peter's successor came from the Philippines rather than one of Europe's established power centers? Yes, this is a country with a strong Catholic faith, but it also has poverty, diaspora, and suffering. What if the man chosen to lead over 1 billion Catholics came from a people who are frequently on the outskirts of world attention while remaining fundamental to the faith's throbbing heart? The Philippines is home to the world's third largest Catholic population. Each Sunday, churches overflow. Processions move through packed streets. Rosaries are prayed on jeepneys. Novenas reverberate in chapels on stilts near the sea. Faith is not an accessory. It is the air that people breathe. Luis Antonio Tagle grew out of that soil. To comprehend the significance of his prospective election, one must first grasp his background. Let us go back to the beginning. Tagle was born in Manila on June 21, 1957, into a fervent Catholic family where faith was a real, breathing, daily rhythm rather than a formal theory. He frequently relates humorous and touching memories about his youth, such as his parents getting up early for Mass, neighbors gathering to pray the Rosary, and the joy of community centered on Christ. He grew up among the average believers, not the privileged, and from the start, he appeared to have a unique sense of purpose. He began seminary and later studied theology at the Catholic University of America, finally getting a PhD in sacred theology. Unlike some academics who slip into theory, Tagle's heart was always centered in people. His pastoral empathy developed alongside his intellect. He was not merely writing about God, he was seeking him, particularly in the pain of others. Over time, he became known for depth rather than flash or charisma. He cried while preaching. When he visited refugee camps, he lingered longer than protocol permitted. He celebrated the Mass with genuine reverence rather than a performance. He did not posture or teach, rather, he observed. And that is what has people paying attention now, not because he wants the Pope, but because he appears willing to wear its weight without wanting its crown. If elected, Tagle would become not only the first Filipino Pope, but also the first from Southeast Asia. He would be the first to carry with him the lived experience of a church that survives on the fringes, rather than Christendom's cultural heritage. He would signify a movement in focus, rather than in theory. The cardinals behind the conclave's closed doors are most likely not thinking about headlines or milestones, but rather on what the church requires right now. And in a fragmented society and a grieving church, the image of a man crying while preaching the gospel may be not just moving, but also vital. So, as the ballots are tabulated and the smoke remains black, the universe continues to murmur, not with certainty, but with potential. Luis Antonio Tagle is a cardinal, a son of Asia, a gospel servant, and possibly the next to be called. Luis Antonio Tagle's story is neither one of overnight success or deliberate desire. It is the gradual, silent unfolding of a life based in prayer, formed by the margins, and characterized by moments of grace that leave no trail of power, simply of presence. To understand why his name continues to ring in whispered whispers and hopeful prayers around the world, you must go back to his early days, not in Rome or even Manila, but in the small town of Imus Cavite, just south of the Philippine capital. Tagle was born into a middle-class Filipino family of Chinese descent, and she grew up in a home where Catholicism was lived as a relationship rather than a ritual. Faith was not just proclaimed, it was demonstrated via morning mass, group devotions, and quiet acts of compassion. His father, Manuel, and mother, Milagros, instilled in him a strong sense of God's nearness. As a child, Luis was known not only for his intelligence, but also for his gentleness. He listened more than he spoke, offered assistance without being asked, and most notably to those who knew him at the time, appeared to pray with a trust that caused others to become silent. His call arrived early. He entered the seminary with the wide eyes of a teen, yet his queries were never superficial. He wanted more than just to know God. He wanted to comprehend how a strong God could be so close to the broken, the outcast, and the poor. That question would follow him into the clergy and influence who he would become. Luis Tagle received his licentiate in sacred theology from the Philippines Loyola School of Theology before going on to obtain his doctorate in systematic theology at the Catholic University of America. His dissertation concentrated on episcopal collegiality, which would prove prophetic in the coming decades as he emerged as a proponent of synodality, a church that hears and walks together. Despite his academic rigor, he never let scholarship overshadow his simplicity. His religion was not apart from life, it was lived. He would explain complex doctrine with stories and fun. As a priest, he would preach like a brother rather than an orator. Parishioners recall his intense look at the altar and long pauses during Mass, not for dramatic effect, but because he frequently fought back tears while saying the words of consecration. His emotions were not a performance. They were the result of a heart that felt every word of the gospel as if it were being said for the first time. Cardinal Tagle's tears are now most intimately associated with him. He weeps when he speaks of Christ's mercy, or recalls the plight of migrants or forgotten children. And in a church where strength is frequently confused with stoicism, his sensitivity has opened doors to hearts that had previously been closed. His tears express what words cannot. This is important. These folks matter. Christ is important. In 2001, at the age of 44, he was appointed Bishop of Imus, returning to shepherd where he grew up. It was a decision that put him in the right place, near to the people, rather than in the spotlight. His pastoral approach was immersive. He paid unannounced visits to people's homes, shared meals in the poorest neighborhoods, and lectured in markets like they were cathedrals. He saw no sense in niceties that built distance. His theology has always included feet, wandering among the suffering and standing barefoot where the church is bleeding. By 2011, his appointment as Archbishop of Manila was viewed as a sign of honesty rather than status. In the Philippines, a country with 80 million Catholics, the Archbishop of Manila is more than just a religious icon. He represents the nation's conscience. Tagle portrayed the character with dignity and calm intensity. He never sought headlines, but his comments frequently became them. In homilies transmitted across the country, he spoke gently, yet millions listened. His compassion, humor, and piercing honesty earned him both love and respect. And again, the tears flowed. Not because he was emotional, but because he was human, and true holiness softens the heart rather than hardening it. In 2019, Pope Francis nominated him Prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, putting him in charge of the Church's global missionary efforts. It was a Vatican post of great significance, yet in many ways, it was merely an extension of Tagle's lifelong practice of proclaiming the gospel with grace rather than grandeur. His leadership in Rome has been characterized by the same attributes that distinguished him in Manila: inclusiveness, simplicity, and profundity. Some in church circles wonder if such tenderness can withstand the hard weight of the papacy, but they misunderstand. Tagle's sensitivity is not a weakness. It is rooted in Christ's paradigm of servant leadership. His humility is not passiveness, it is the inner power of someone who understands that true authority comes from love, not dominance. This is not a man seeking power. Rather, he is aware of the weight of the cross and continues to say yes. In an ego-driven culture, Tagle offers something radical: the bravery to be tiny, the courage to feel, and the courage to follow Christ to the margins and stay there. His life does not cry, "Elect me," but rather whispers something much more powerful: "If it is your will, Lord, use me." The key question of this moment is not merely who will be Pope, but what type of Pope does the Church require right now? Polls and pundits cannot provide an answer to this topic. It requires more than geopolitical strategy or ideological credentials. The Church must explore her spirit, looking not at what is popular, but at what is necessary. Because the world that awaits the next pontiff is not the same as the one that welcomed the previous. It is more broken, distracted, and thirsty for clarity, while also being more averse to it. In most of the Western world, the Catholic Church is slowly losing faith. Churches that once packed with people now reverberate with silence. Generations are drifting away from apathy rather than rage. The rhythm of faith, which once defined entire cultures, has been supplanted by the tempo of consumption, screens, and skepticism. Many people regard the Church as irrelevant, remote, and a vestige of a less enlightened age. And in the void of meaning, secular ideologies, some well-intended, others controversial, seek to fill it. Meanwhile, in the global South, something unusual is occurring. Faith is not disappearing in the Philippines, Nigeria, Brazil, or India. Rather, it is burning, not without hardship, poverty, or persecution, but alive in a way that cannot be overlooked. Masses are held outside due to a shortage of space, processions impede traffic, and youth organizations form choruses to rival stadiums. In these communities, the Church is more than just a structure. It is a source of life. This is the conundrum that the future Pope must face. A Church shrinks in the West but grows in the South. A Church scarred by scandal but yet sacred. Some consider the Church to be overly conservative, while others believe it is too compromising. A Church that is both ancient and urgently needed in a world that seeks purpose. And then there comes the anguish. Real, deep, and unresolved. The wounds from the abuse scandals have not healed. Survivors' cries continue to echo. Trust has been broken. Many people feel betrayed not only by corrupt priests, but also by the institution that protects them. A future Pope must not only acknowledge the grief, but also embody repentance. He must be a man who is unafraid of suffering and does not hide behind routine or image. He must lead by descending rather than ascending. Christ himself provided the blueprint. The greatest among you must serve all. Matthew 23:11. The papacy is not a throne. It is a towel and a basin. It is not a place to rule. It is a space to pour out. So, what type of guy can bear this cross? He must have complete confidence, not only in theology, but in the living God. A religion that stands up to investigation. A faith that sees through the murk. A faith that says yes, even when the route takes you through fire. He must demonstrate humility, the kind that does not require applause to feel validated, the kind who listens before saying, the kind that recognizes when the Church needs to reform, not in truth, but in love. He must have the guts to suffer, be misunderstood, criticized, slandered, and even betrayed, because the world will not be kind, because the devil refuses to rest, because shepherding the Church entails carrying the burden of souls. And he must love the truth, not as a weapon, but as a source of life. And love for the impoverished is not only a photo opportunity, but a way of life. In this perspective, many people look at Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle and question, not with confidence, but with genuine curiosity, whether he is that man. He has not campaigned. He has not demanded a voice. But his life exemplifies these characteristics in quiet abundance. He speaks with conviction, not scorn. He understands theological language, as well as emotional language. He understands the Church both inside and out, from Rome's conference halls to Manila's squatter settlements. Tagle is not a symbol, he is a servant, and in this hour, the Church may require less symbols and more workers. Still, the conclave has not spoken, and no man, no matter how qualified, may elect himself. The question remains, not just for the cardinals, but for all of us. What kind of pope does the Church require now? Perhaps the answer is not in what the Church wants, but in what Christ desires. And perhaps it is someone who is already carrying his scars in the silence of his love. For centuries, the Catholic Church has been rooted in the West. with its leaders, institutions, and culture influenced by Europe's theological and political history. From Rome's towering basilicas to Paris's libraries and Cologne's cathedrals, the Church's voice has long been heard in Latin and spoken in a European tongue. However, the Church's heart no longer beats the loudest. In the 21st century, the center of gravity shifts. This transition brings with it a need for representation rather than novelty, not for political correctness, but for spiritual resonance. In this context, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has emerged as a figure in which much of the global Church sees itself. The vast majority of Catholics today live in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In these areas, faith is not being challenged or abandoned. It is lived out on a daily basis amidst poverty, persecution, and joy. Churches are overflowing. Vocations are increasing. Whole communities revolve around the Eucharist. These are not areas in need of attention. They are the newest missionaries. Despite this vitality, the Church's top leadership has remained predominantly Western. That is why the idea of a pope from Southeast Asia is more than just symbolic. It is profoundly important. Cardinal Tagle, who was born in the Philippines, speaks from the periphery of global power rather than the center. Despite this, he does so with a voice that can be heard around the world. He is a rare combination of theological depth and pastoral sensitivity, a man who understands Rome while also understanding the rhythm of life in communities where Christ is proclaimed through song, suffering, and service. His work has taken him to refugee camps, youth ministries, interfaith panels, and global synods, where he serves as a bridge rather than a guest. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle is not a celebrity. Rather, he serves as a bridge between generations, faith and wounding, doctrine and compassion. Tagle, known for his gentle voice and unwavering advocacy for migrants, refugees, and the poor, led Caritas Internationalis, putting him at the center of global suffering. He does not just talk about mercy, he demonstrates it, often in tears, humility, and faithfulness. Tagle is a reality for young people. He does not seek relevance, he embodies it. He appeals to a generation disillusioned with institutions through storytelling, emotional sermons, and open dialogue. In interfaith settings, particularly in Asia, he listens before speaking, hoping to win hearts rather than arguments. Many Catholics worldwide feel seen in Tagle. A bishop once said, "When he speaks, it is as if he carries my parish with him." A young priest added, "He preaches sitting with us, not over us." His leadership does not exoticize the margins. Rather, it embraces them. Tagle may never be pope. However, his mere presence as a possibility indicates that the Church is willing to listen to voices from the periphery. He promotes climate justice not as a policy, but as a pastoral reality. He links deforestation to displaced farmers, polluted rivers, and broken families. He weeps at the altar, not for theatrics, but out of deep Eucharistic devotion. On complex issues such as LGBTQ+ inclusion and divorced Catholics, Tagle adheres to Church teaching while urging compassion, understanding, and spiritual discernment. His vision does not involve abandoning truth, but rather accompanying people with mercy. Some believe he is too emotional, too aligned with Pope Francis, and too ambiguous for a polarized Church. But Tagle welcomes the tensions. He believes that growth comes from dialogue, not division. If elected Pope, he would represent more than just Asia and the global South. He would be a sign that the Church is shifting towards tenderness, humility, and deeper listening. Even if he does not win the election, his story is important, because it asks, what kind of shepherd do we long for? A celebrity, a warrior, or a man who bends down, weeps, and leads with Christ's hands? The Church may not choose Tagle, but the fact that we are asking these questions reveals something sacred, our desire for authenticity, mercy, and servant-hearted leadership. Whether or not white smoke rises for him, one thing is certain: the Church is listening. Tagle's quiet but courageous voice has already moved people around the world about what it means to follow Christ in a world that has forgotten how. Because the truth is, the Church does not seek a savior. She already owns one. But she may soon choose a man who leads us back to him more clearly. If this journey inspired you, If you see Tagle as a reflection of the Church's future, or if you simply want to stay in touch with what is going on, like, subscribe and share this video. Please join us in praying, hoping, and watching, because the story of the next Pope is still being written, and it just might begin with tears.